You found a place to belong here in the Circle of Friends. I'm Missy, and I have two very special guests today. Carol, you are with us regularly with Joanne and have been on the air many times, and I'm glad you came back today. But you brought your own special guest, didn't you?
I did. I'm so happy to have my husband here today, James, and I talk about him many times on the air, but I'm just so glad this is his first time doing radio, so I'm just happy that he's here today.
Welcome, James.
And good morning. Thank you for having me. It's really good to be here today.
Oh, it's such a joy. And if it makes you feel any better, I coerced my husband into being on the radio not long ago. And he's still fine. He's walking around. And who knows, he may even be back with us at some point. And maybe James, you will too. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the radio program with me is because I know your story. I know of your story. Of course, Carol, I've known you for a while now. James, I have never met you personally, but I know of you in the community. And so it's very precious to me to watch you walk in your faith and in your love for one another. Tell me now, you for years were in the pastorate, James. How long were you in the pastorate?
Boy, I'd have to look at my wife to even tell you long I've been in the pastorate.
I do the same thing. My husband was in the pastorate, and I look at him, I think, I don't know. It's too long for me to remember. So,
James, when we were first married, so we just celebrated 30 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
And, we
Yes,
got married
we
in
did.
1990, so he started into the pastorate in 1990, and then 10 years ago stopped pastoring. So I guess that would have been in 2010.
yeah.
So he was in for 20. He was in for 20.
He was in for 20.
And if anybody out there's been in ministry,
was gonna
they
say,
might feel the same way.
You might not get that joke unless you've been in
Yeah.
ministry, right? Oh, that is awesome. So tell me a little bit how you met.
Oh boy. Well, we met in kindergarten in school, really. So we've known
Really?
each other, ever since that age.
Yeah, it's funny because you know how elementary schools will have like two kindergartens, two first grades. Well, when our class, we went to Berlin Elementary, so we're from here, born and raised here in Holmes County. But there was only enough of us to have one. Now we were a big class back then,
Yes,
probably
right.
30 kids, but we were in the same class first through K through sixth grade.
Wow.
So we were. We were
Not
in
only
the same
that,
class
but we
together.
also went to the same church.
Okay.
Yes,
So-
yeah, that's right.
So we knew each other well.
Yeah, my brothers played baseball with James.
right.
Really, we grew up, having the same kind of environments.
Right.
Yeah, as far as
Yeah.
church and school.
So good friends all along the way, or was that? I mean, sometimes Beth says she married her high school sweetheart. Were you guys sweethearts in high school, or was that much later?
Yes, I'm trying to remember, like our first date was after our junior year.
Right,
wasn't
right.
it?
Yeah, so we started dating the summer after our junior year. Not much dating going on then, just a few dates. And then that fall, really, we started dating. He was in basketball, so he was
Busy.
All
busy.
He
kinds
was
of-
busy.
all kinds of
He
sports,
wasn't actually.
yes, I
I'm not
really
sure if you were
was.
even officially allowed to date.
And you're right. Back then, that was kind of the rules.
Yeah.
At that point,
So
but-
we just I don't know. We worked together. I always attribute like us even being together with. We were asked to help be leaders in kids' church.
Okay.
So I played the piano and helped do singing, and we had our youth leaders were in charge of the children's during church time, and so we were both helpers in there. And of course, like I said, we had known each other all along, and friends, but I wouldn't say like I was just head over heels, because I just knew him,
Right,
from when I was little.
Too
So,
familiar. That's just
one of the
James.
guys.
Yeah.
He's just one of the guys.
Oh, well, I love friend stories because that's my husband and I were good friends for a long time before we ever. In fact, I always say we only had one date before we got married, and that's probably true because we were in different states. But that is so sweet. So, were you in college together, or were you separated at that time?
You see, we went to Bible school 1 year together. I think you were there for 1 year, and then I went on to graduate from the school.
Yeah,
so,
he went for 3 years. It was only a 3-year school.
right.
And it was a Bible school. And I decided I wanted to go to Bible school, and I actually wasn't going to go to the same Bible school because I didn't want people to think I was chasing him down, following him there. And we had a really wise pastor that sat me down and just asked, okay, so if you guys are talking about marriage, he took a gap year. I mean, and so we were 20, something like that. And he said, if you're talking about marriage, we dated for 5 years, so. If you're talking about marriage, I recommend you go to the same school and have, then you can have that same experience there. And so I went for a year. They had a year program. I went for a year and came home and actually was hired as the secretary at the church, and James went on to finish.
Wow. Wow. Well, so Carol, I want to ask you this question because this, of course, my husband was in the pastorate for many, many years. And one of the things about being, quote unquote, a pastor's wife, I always wonder, is that something that you knew beforehand and felt called to? Or, some pastors' wives are like, they married a guy and then all of a sudden he decided to become a pastor. And that then that becomes their calling because, they're in the marriage and it comes as a surprise to them. I'm just curious. Did you know James was headed toward the pastorate?
No, I didn't. I don't think, James, I don't think you went planning to be a pastor just to get closer to God. And
that's right.
And I loved Jesus ever since I was little. I had a couple visions, dreams, I don't know what you call them, when I was a little girl, that I met Jesus and I was on this stairway to heaven and I met him on a landing. There were all these people going to meet him, and so I had some experiences, loved Jesus since I was little, just wanted to serve in the church, but always felt like, wanted to be used by God, but didn't know how. And even when I went to Bible school, it was interesting because I don't know if you can relate to this, but I remember one of my friends at Bible school, she said, well, I'm going to be in ministry. And I was like, well, I didn't know women could be in ministry. Mm-hmm. And so that I didn't aspire to that. So church secretary was about as close as I came to thinking. And I guess I didn't think pastor's wife at that time. I probably would have learned a lot or asked more questions if I thought that was coming. So
took off running, huh? Yeah. So James, tell me a little bit about when you really received the call or began to think God may want me to be a pastor.
It was probably while I was at Bible school, if I can remember right, because I did go to Bible school, not with that in mind.
Yeah.
I really went just because I wanted to get closer to God. And so it was something purposeful that I could do to do that. So I would say it was in the process of being at Bible school that I began to feel the draw, the call to minister to his people.
That is so cool. It's so neat to think, that is it's a great illustration of what all of us can do. Draw closer to God, and He's going to guide. Even if you have no idea where you're headed or what God wants you to do, He will show you. He is faithful to that. And getting in His Word and walking with Him and having a relationship with Him is essential to really hearing His voice and knowing what He wants you to do. Yeah, so you got married, you said, in
1990.
1990. Boy, you guys are young'uns.
Well, we thought we were old. I thought we were old then. Of course, like I said, we dated for 5 years. And so, it was, I remember, I think it was on our honeymoon, the Gulf War was on TV, if I remember right, or Kuwait, going into Kuwait.
Yeah.
And so, it was during a season when, but you're just young and in love, and that's what I remember.
So did you were you a pastor at the time you got married, or was that afterwards?
No, that was afterwards.
Afterwards.
Yes, but I don't remember how soon afterward.
So he graduated. I probably, looking back now, I probably wouldn't recommend this, but he graduated in May, I think, and we got married at the end of July. I was like, 5 years, buddy. It's not 5 years. I'll plan the wedding while you're gone. You're going to come home. Let's get married. And if you don't want to get married, then tell me now, because, it seemed like such a long time. And then, of course, now I look at how young we were, but we were young and in love. And, we kind of grew up together just through
Yeah.
all that. And then he started at our church in September. And so he came home, back to Holmes County. Both came back to Holmes County. I was the secretary at the church we grew up in. And then the church we grew up in hired him to be a children's pastor.
children.
Wow. So really, basically, your whole life has been in that same church.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, yeah,
That's incredible. And looking back on it now, I think through your journey and what that has meant to you to have that stability of family around you to embrace you and help you and encourage you, especially as a young pastor. And I remember, oh my goodness, when I look back, I don't know if you guys do this or not, but my husband and I look back and we just kind of like cringe when we think of our first years in the ministry and how much we knew and what we were going to do. You know what I'm saying? It's that brashness of, we're going to change the world. God's called us to do great things. And that I'm not making fun of people who feel that way, because I think
Right.
that's
Yes.
great hope
Right.
in you, and
Yes.
God draws it out of you. But with a little wisdom, I look back and think, oh my, the mistakes we made, if we could just maybe, but again, it's a journey, one we're all on. And as we learn and as we grow, thank God, God works in us and grows us and changes us and matures us, because when I look back and think of that time, for many of us, when we look back, that's, we all mature. I guess that's the best way to say
and
it.
we were children's pastors and had no children. And I remember
That's right.
when some of the parents, one of the parents in particular, it was just precious, and I totally get it now, but he was, and the senior pastor at the time, there was a transition in pastors right before we came on, and but the senior pastor and his wife didn't have any kids either. And so you had this young staff who hadn't raised any kids, and just life experience wasn't there.
Right.
And I look back and I think, how could they let us be in charge of their children? We had a lot of energy, but not a lot of wisdom. I remember this one time, our first class was a preschool class, and I still have so many stories from that preschool class because they were just precious. But we had this thing where we decided we're going to teach them like how to listen in class, because you had to learn how to get them to listen. And so we decided we're going to put paper clips on their sleeve, and when they're bad, we'll take a paper clip away. And so, of course, we had all kinds of crying and tears. These preschoolers, when you take their clip away. And I had a good friend who was in school. She went to school to be a preschool teacher. And she's like, no. How about we reward them, like for good behavior? And
That's right. That's what we should do. Do it that way.
So that's just an example. I look back but just am so grateful for those years and those young families.
Yeah.
It was a really like a growing church at that time, and lots of kids.
And lots of preparation for your own children.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
right.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that after we take a break, and we'll hear more of James and Carol Yoder's story after this.
In the heart of Amish country, you will find 3 wonderful, unique stores: the Village Gift Barn, Country Gatherings, and Moxie. Village Gift Barn is filled with beautiful home decor, a boutique with stylish clothing and jewelry. Country Gatherings takes a step back in time with primitive decor and a garden center. Don't forget to visit Moxie, our big city boutique with small town charm. Located in the heart of Amish country, Village Gift Barn, Country Gatherings, and Moxie.
Thirsty, come, come,
We're back. You're with Missy and Carol and James, and we are hearing their wonderful story. I love this because it's a chance for me to kind of get to know you a little better and to actually hear your story and to learn that you're homegrown. You've been here all your lives, and it's funny to me because I feel like we should have crossed paths somewhere earlier than we did. You know what I'm saying? Because we had a connection at one time with the church that you were in, probably before you were actually pastoring there. So maybe it was, we did a mission trip with your church and grew close to several of the people there and loved it. It was life-changing for us. But isn't that odd that, you're close, but you just kind of miss each other,
Right.
It's almost a story in there somewhere. But Carol, we were talking earlier about your early years, and I wanted to talk a little bit, about being in the pastorate. As you said, you kind of grow up in the pastorate. You kind of grow up in the spotlight, so to speak, and then you start having kids, and then it's multiplied, I think. Because people are watching how you're, not only what you say, what you do, how you're treating people, how you're living your life, all those things, but now suddenly you have a child. How are you raising that child? And I don't know about you, but I experienced that many people had much, much advice to give me. And how shall I put this? Not all of it was either welcomed or some of it was kind of hard because it didn't line up with what I thought I should do with my child, but they felt very free in telling me how I should raise my child, and I'm thankful for them because, we were young in the ministry, but it's still difficult because there's a lot of that that you don't have great friends to run to, like in a normal situation as a young parent. You maybe have other young parents to run and toss ideas out. The pastorate can be isolating, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think that's true. One thing that comes to mind, though, Missy, when you're talking is because we were children's pastors, and the lead pastors were family. We had cousins growing up together. So I think in our situation, we didn't maybe face that quite as much because they had on staff, going through the same kind of like time in life, that they were allowed to be children. And we never said to them, I was really conscious of this, to say, hey, everybody's watching, not to say, hey, people are watching you, do this, do that, or people are watching us. I always tried to relate it to doing the right thing, just relating it not to people, but to God, and what would He want us to do. And so I think I was conscious of that. I probably felt more under the spotlight than I think our kids were kind of oblivious because they just got to see their cousins all the time.
Right. Well, that's awesome.
Loved that. So
Yeah.
But they grew up in the building, probably, more than a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And if they were like our kids, they were there for every service, I mean, there just was no question. I mean, our kids, even when they played, I can still remember this, they played ball, they played Little League, and we had a Wednesday night service, and my husband was just adamant, you will be at the Wednesday night service. And I know sports are important, and we don't want to, but you will be there. And so, I mean, he went to the coaches and said, our kids are going to leave at this time. They'll show up, they'll be faithful, we'll be there, but when we need to leave for church, we're leaving for church. And so but that instilled in them something about commitment, not just to, okay, I'm going to play ball or play a sport and I've got to be there and show up, but this is important and I have to prioritize my life regardless of what others say or even sometimes how I feel. Sometimes it's a discipline, and I'll admit that when you are at every service, every time the doors are open, you're the first there and the last to leave. But there's blessing in that as well. I mean, it sounds like, oh, that's awful way to, you're forcing your, no. I look at my kids now and they are all faithful in ministry, not just in going to church, but in ministering to other people. And I think that developed in them a love for people, a concern for people, and a knowledge that if I put God first in my life, everything else will fall in place. And I think you have a unique opportunity to do that when you're in ministry with your kids.
Yes. And just watching them grow up with so many. We only had 2 kids. I always say it's because we had 100 other of everybody else's kids we were watching. But always having somebody to play with, or because we were there a lot. Wednesday nights was small group, so every parent would drop their kids off at the church and would go to their small group. There's certain things in church life that we were never part of, like small groups,
yes.
because we were always doing children's ministry. We were always doing Vacation Bible School many times, and I don't know why we did this, but I think because of baseball and stuff, but we always did Vacation Bible School over our anniversary. There's things like that that I think now.
Why did we
Why
do
did
that?
Ours was over my husband's birthday every year. So, there are times like that where and every year I think, man, we should move this, but sometimes it's just in the church calendar.
Yes.
And there is sacrifice. Let's not make light of that, because when you're called and you give to the Lord and He blesses you, there are sacrifices that your pastors are making and your church leaders are making, and I don't want to make light of that either, because I lived through some of that. You're on call 24/7. You get called back from vacation. You spend your anniversary rounding up all these kids rather than going away somewhere together, or delaying some of that. There are sacrifices, but there are many, many blessings that come from that. And the blessings come because of the obedience to the Lord, I believe. If you're called, He will give you the strength that you need for the ministry, and He will bless you in the midst of all that is a struggle, because He'll be your strength. And I'm sure you saw that through the years.
Yes.
That whatever challenge came along, God was there to help you, build you up, help build your kids up. And let's talk about your kids. 2 of them.
Yes.
2 of them, yes, kids. Andrew and Cameron, my goodness.
Andrew's married. He got married in 2016, so he just celebrated his 4-year anniversary. He married his college sweetheart, so her name's Rachel, and they live in Los Angeles.
Oh my!
Because they finished their schooling out there. They went to Mount Vernon in the radio and video broadcasting. They met in their major, radio and video broadcasting, and in Mount Vernon, they can't fulfill all of the obligations for the minor, which was film. So there's this coalition of Christian schools that has gone together. So across the nation, or even the world, maybe, because I think there's a semester in New Zealand. But so if you had a film minor, you went to Los Angeles for 3 months. If you had a music minor, you went to Tennessee, Nashville. If you had, political science or whatever.
Right.
So anyway, they went to Los Angeles. Then when they graduated, they got married a year later, and then decided to move within a month
Real soon after
of their
they
wedding.
got married.
And so
then about a year and a half ago was it that our youngest son, Cameron, also moved to LA.
Yeah.
So we're getting used to life without them close by.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
that's
both
been hard.
the boys are on the West Coast.
yes, and they're within like 15 minutes of
Oh,
each other.
that's good.
Yeah, that's good. But
For them.
yeah,
but
for
come on
them
now.
exactly.
And no grandchildren yet?
no,
Not yet.
No grandchildren.
Yeah, that's a long way.
Yeah, I know.
But thankfully there are, we are in the world of Skype calls and
Yes.
FaceTime and all of those things, social media, to keep in touch, which is really a blessing when they're that far away. But there's also a sense of they're doing well,
Yes.
and you can be
Yes.
happy in that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, again, we're living in such a tumultuous times, I guess, is what I would say. And so just even, the isolation, and of course we know Los Angeles, they shut down again. They're more, because they're more in the city.
Right.
There are more regulations and things like that. So
And to see them grappling on their own now as adults as to how can they're asking the question, how can I make an impact in my world here
Right.
today?
And especially their world is so small right
Yeah,
now, because when you
right.
move, first of all, new job,
Right,
new
right.
whatever, and then not being able to build a lot of relationships.
Right.
So it's challenging, but we know And that's one of the things I think just in our journey, talking about, and everybody's journey who's listening is, I always say that I trusted in God, but the rest of the story is that we learn to trust God
Yes.
throughout life. And that's what I feel like he's, if I could boil it down into what he's been teaching me, is that there's seasons in life, and that can we trust him in every season of life.
I love that.
And so I do have a scripture I wanted to read. And of course, talking about seasons, this is out of Ecclesiastes, which is, it's an interesting book of the Bible, but this is a really familiar passage. But I feel like this is something that I am learning, we are learning. And so I just want to read out of Ecclesiastes 3. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. That's interesting in light of what we're facing right now with our distancing. A time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And so just even thinking about trust in light of that scripture, it's like really just about trusting him for every season of life. And that is, we're still learning. We're still learning to trust, how to trust completely.
Wow.
And so that is the journey, and it's one that has its ups and downs.
Ups and downs.
That's right.
For sure.
That's right.
Well, we're at the end of our day today, but I want to leave our listeners with that challenge. First of all, have you trusted in God? And now, whatever season you're in, are you trusting God? He is so worthy. He is so faithful. He is so trustworthy. Listeners, we encourage you to do that. And we encourage you to join us tomorrow. James and Carol will be back, and we'll talk more about their story here in the Circle of Friends.
This program was brought to you through the generous support of donors and listeners like you. To contact Circle of Friends Ministries, you can write to P.O. Box 345, Berlin, Ohio, 44610, or find us on Facebook at circleoffriends.fm. Program archives can be found at thelight959.com.